I've talked to a lot of authors. I've brought you information on a lot of political books. But I think the book that we're going to talk about right now could possibly be my favorite, or at the very least, it has my favorite title of all time. The book is called Super Mad at Everything All the Time, Political Media and Our National Anger. Dr. Alison Dagnes is the professor and chair of the political science department at Shippensburg University, and this is her book. Agnes, I am so pleased to have you here today.
First of all, thank you. That is maybe the nicest introduction I've ever had. This is my honor, and what a joy. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's start off with you giving a sort of an overview of your book to the audience, if you would.
Sure. What's crazy is that it came out 5 years ago, and I'm in the process of updating everything with a whole new book because so much has changed. But it really is about political media and right-wing political media during Trump 1.0. Because what I noted at the start, like in 2016, was that my students, especially my conservative students, were talking about things and getting their news from places that I had no idea what they were talking about, none. And I make this classic mistake over and over again that I think if I investigate something and I can explain it, then it'll make me feel better. And in this case, that did not happen. I did not feel much better. But what I found after interviewing about 36 different Washington and New York journalists and producers and activists and a whole bunch of folks was that the American political media have become very polarized, but not in equal spheres. There's an asymmetry to this. And on one side are the mainstream media and the purposely liberal progressive media. And on the other is this tightly closed, non-competitive antidote to everybody else. And so what right-wing media outlets I discovered were doing was really not news. It was just more commentary and throwing narratives up to see what would stick on the walls like spaghetti, and then, putting those narratives through. And it created an echo chamber, a feedback loop, filter bubbles, all the things that we talk about. But what was riveting was really to hear how many people working in Washington, working in the news, even working within conservative media, sort of copped to the fact that they were doing something totally different. This was not, when people say they get the news from Facebook, that's when everybody should really start running scared. And so I investigated all of that, and I answered a bunch of questions as to how this came about and why it happened and why it's so popular. And I was able to answer the questions, but I did not feel better about it. And unfortunately, what's happened, even with 4 years of a Democratic president, is that it's no longer just this right-wing media circle system anymore. It's become far more fragmented. But the foundation of that right-wing media ecosystem and the real ferocious anger towards progressives, towards even just moderates, towards Republicans who are insufficiently Trumpy, that has exacerbated exponentially. And so it's astonishing to me that everything that I was talking about in 2019 has not only continued, but grown in a way that's really frightening.
Ugh.
I know. Sorry.
Well, what's the fuel that is causing this fire to burn out of control?
That's a great question. There are a bunch of culprits. And so, first is human nature, right? We as people, apparently we have discovered, are very motivated by anger and by rage. And then technology tapped into this, and social media is a very big culprit in all of this because we're able to connect with one another in ways that are very good, but we're also able to connect with one another based on a foundation of grievance that may or may not be accurate. And so what right-wing media outlets have done is they've detached their audience from reality. And the political wins on the right that have come from this has changed the incentive structure for electoral politics. And so if you look at kind of the big names, most Americans really have a tough time naming their own congressperson, but I think most people, and your audience 100% are going to know, they know who Marjorie Taylor Greene is, right? They know who Matt Gaetz is. And that's not because they're very efficient in terms of lawmaking, but because they were very loud, and they were very rageful, and they made you feel just really, really angry. And so that has totally shifted the way that 50% of the American public is not only consuming news and understanding stuff, but really moving them away from a fact-based, reality-based information system. And it leads to overconfidence, and it leads to wide misinformation, and it led to the election of Donald Trump back again.
Why would consuming all this misinformation increase their confidence?
Because it's another excellent question. Because as they connect with one another, they realize, like, oh, okay, you agree with me? Great. Then you're good. If you disagree with me, then you're bad. And so it's just very easy now to cut people who disagree with you out of your life. But if you consume information from inside this sphere, then your greatest fears are going to be reaffirmed. You're going to be told you're the smart one for identifying these things, for believing the quote-unquote truth. And you can find compatriots who may not necessarily live around you, but who may live around the country and who believe everything you believe. And therefore, if you're mad about something, you could find someone who's even madder. And that kind of connection is, it's really, really dangerous. Now, I live in a part of Pennsylvania. It's Trump country. It's very conservative. And so what I've seen is that when you even take it off of social media, the folks who swim in these ponds and who get their news from Fox News or Breitbart or OANN, then when you go out and you meet your buddy at the VFW, if they're swimming in those ponds too, then you can connect and reaffirm each other in person. So it's both virtual. It's not just our phones. It also is just the inability of people to go beyond, it's not even their comfort zones, just to even fact-check something. That's just toast. And there's really no reason to if everybody around you is telling you you're the smart one. Real self-fulfilling prophecy, real nice loop they've got going there. Yes. And yes,
why is it? Does it have something to do with the way we are wired physiologically? I agree with you. I mean, anger is much more riveting. Much more motivating. There was a famous reported interview right after Rush Limbaugh. As soon as they got rid of the fairness doctrine and Rush Limbaugh didn't have to, do both sides, he really came into his own, and it was all, this anger and really, really vitriolic radio ranting. And a group of Republicans visited him, and they were like, oh, my God, we are so glad you're on our side. Let's talk about some of the issues that we would really like you to talk about on the air. And the way it was reported, he looked at them and he said, I don't care about issues. I care about ratings. And when I get mad, I get ratings. So I'm not a Republican per se. I'm not an ideologue. I just want to get people riled up every day. And of course, he became a huge star. He did. And that's such a fantastic, of course it starts a little bit, it starts before that, but that's a great jumping off point, because as Rush's star ascended, and I'm not sure if you remember, there were Rush rooms where people would go have lunch at a steakhouse. Oh my God, I didn't remember that. Yeah, and listen to Rush Limbaugh. And they would, all of these guys would sit there and drink martinis and smoke cigars inside and listen. They would broadcast
the Rush Limbaugh show. And it became so popular that he tied himself with Newt Gingrich, who became sort of the star of the Republican House by changing leadership in 1994 from 40 years of Democratic control to Republican control. And he did that by taking a page from Rush Limbaugh's playbook, by saying, okay, we are just going to, everyone's been getting along way too well. We have to start using these very specific words about our Democratic opponents, and we're going to crush them. And I like to say that Democrats bring an NPR tote bag to a gunfight. The Democrats are just, they always want to, when they go low, we go high. And it's more nuanced. It's why a right-wing talk radio, or left-wing, talk radio really doesn't work, because it's more nuanced, right? And hearing the vitriol and the screaming, that's the thing that gets all the attention. So it started with Rush. It moved to Fox News. And along the way, the Republican Party went, amen.
Well, I have found that when I get a troll who really just wants to fight with me, that really makes an impression on people. But I've told people that is not who I am. That's not what I want the show to be. And frankly, I don't know if he deserved any of the other awards he got, but Rush Limbaugh certainly should have gotten an award for just the stamina, because, being angry all the time is exhausting.
That's what I kept thinking, that after Biden was elected, like, everyone must be just so tired. Like, maybe we will go back to some kind of politics where, sure, there's going to be oppositional, discussions and rhetoric, and that's fine. But maybe the temperature will lower. I kind of thought it would be like a car driving around a cul-de-sac and they would eventually run out of gas. I have no idea. First of all, I am in awe of you being able to talk intelligently for as long as you do every day, because that takes so much effort and so much intelligence. But to be able for 3 hours a day to just rail against somebody, I don't understand how he did it. I don't understand how the right wing is still doing it. And it must be some sort of like emotional feedback where you just feel like, okay, I got more in the tank. I can keep on hating. I don't get it. I just don't. It's different to have a thoughtful conversation. Still hard, but different. It's exhausting. It must be just terrible. Ugh. I don't want to live in that world at all.
I don't want to live in that world at all. And here's an interesting, we have to take a break. I'll get to that interesting thought when we come right back after this. I'm talking to Dr. Alison Dagnes, professor and chair of political science at Shippensburg University. We'll be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Dr. Alison Dagnes, professor and chair of the political science department at Shippensburg University. She's written a very interesting book, Super Mad at Everything All the Time, Political Media and Our National Anger. Speaking of that anger, it has been discussed how that is part of the reason why some people follow Donald Trump. He makes them feel things. He hates the people they hate. He gives them permission to hate those people in a more public way. And I found, which was much to my surprise, after the election, after Kamala lost and Donald Trump won, I had more trolls in my text line than I had had the previous 6 months. And they were all so angry. They were furious. You could just see the steam coming out of their ears, even though it was a text. And I would write back to them, dude, you won. Your candidate won. Now is the time when you're supposed to be happy. Trust me, if Kamala Harris had won, I would be happy. I would be feeling happy feels and saying happy things. But the tsunami of troll anger was worse after Trump won than before he won. It was like I got the impression, and please tell me what you think, I got the impression that the anger was so core to who they were that even though they had won, that it was still going to be a big part of everything they said and did. Paul, is Dr. Alison still there?
Hello?
Oh.
Hello?
Hi.
Hello?
Yeah, we got you back.
Oh, dear. Okay, great. Sorry about that.
Did you hear my little rant there?
Did. Yes, I did. And I just wanted to say I'm not as public-facing as you are, but I certainly have gotten some trolling in my time, and it is a terrible feeling. So I'm so sorry that you have to go through that. To me, it is not surprising because when you have been fed a steady diet of rage for as long as these folks have, it's like you're driving down the highway going 60 miles an hour, and you can't just shift into reverse and suddenly become happy, right? I mean, the fact that Trump actually legitimately won should have been the balm that took over all of the leading up to the election, the misinformation and they're going to steal it, they're going to steal it, they're going to steal it. You know, suddenly it's an electoral miracle. It wasn't stolen. Like, couldn't you be happy for 3 minutes? And it's like, nope, because all I want to feel is just this rage towards people who believe something different than I do. I can't wrap my arms around it because it makes no sense. And the truth is, if they were in a room with you and they spoke to you and had a conversation, they would probably like you very much, and they probably wouldn't be a real schnook on, with keyboard courage online. Because it just happens over and over again, right? You meet somebody and maybe they disagree with you, but then you realize you've got 85 other things to talk about that aren't political. But, man, when you just are swimming in those waters of fury, it's impossible to shake that off quickly or possibly even ever, which is really spells doom, I think, for us as a country.
Well, you know, a lot of the Capitol police officers were very concerned that if Donald Trump pardoned the January 6th insurrectionists, as of course he has, that would make them and their families and their kids targets of this kind of, maybe not the average Trump follower, but the angry, motivated Trump follower. Because as you know, these days, it doesn't take a mob to make your life miserable. It takes one nut job to make your life miserable and sometimes make it dangerous. I was so glad that when Joe Biden put out those pardons, he included the Capitol police officers, because I know Michael Fanone was saying on CNN that he was very frightened for his mom, for his kids, that they were actually going to be in danger.
Yeah, what's astonishing is that in a country where we have more guns than we have people, we now have a communication system that allows you to reach out and contact almost anybody. Right? And my students who are especially adroit online, they can find anything. I mean, it's just incredible to me. And so now that you can, again, with keyboard courage, right? Because you're hiding behind a screen and and some made up name, and you think no one's going to know that it's me. You feel emboldened. And yet there are those folks, and they do have weapons, and it really doesn't, it may not even be 1% of them, but it just doesn't matter, because violence, I think, is, I don't want to say inevitable, but boy, it sure leads, like all of this rage leads towards violence. It just has to. And so tamping down on all of this anger would really do a lot, I think, to help. And I think back to the end of the Trump administration, and trust me, I mean, I was never a fan at all, but he could have walked into re-election had he just handled the pandemic with any semblance of leadership, just by not saying that it's fake, not saying don't wear masks, not calling it the ouchie Fauci or whatever, all the racist stuff. All he has to do is just put down his shields for a little bit and say, okay, you know what? I'm not going to lash out against the Democrats. I'm not going to call, especially women of color, low IQ. Maybe I'll be able to get some stuff done if I just try and work with the opposition party as opposed to antagonizing them. And I just don't see any indication that he's going to do that, which means that the threats will continue and they will grow. And as we, are in just a wash in information and content and this attention economy, where everybody's competing for eyeballs and ears and, the cameras, politicians and media figures, all of it, and all of it's monetized. There's so many more platforms. It's not going to get quieter. Unless, it's just not like the fish rots from the head, and so it can be quieter if somebody comes in and says, you know what, everybody take a breath. And there's zero incentive for anyone to do that.
The people who are fueled by anger, will that eventually work itself out? Will that emotion simply at some point run out? Speaking personally, that is not something I could sustain, no matter how deeply I believe in someone and what they're doing.
Right.
Do you think it will fade of its own?
I had hopes. I really did. I thought that I did not anticipate a successful second run for Donald Trump. I really thought, okay, that was his act, and now we're on to a different play. But I'm not sure. I think, to your question earlier, there's something that's inherent within us, to hold on to this. We now see so many progressives, who are just also enraged, and for every right reason, right? I mean, the threats to democracy, the threats to people, to groups, that can be infuriating. The problem is that those on the right are getting information that may or may not be true that's telling them that they're angry for all of the right information also. And so that's the problem, right? I think there's unfortunately just too much money to be gained by all of this, and unless those incentives change, I'm not sure how we're going to be able to pull ourselves out of it.
I
know it's not optimistic. I'm so sorry.
Well, let's look forward to the next book. How it all ended and how it got so much better.
It's actually the title of the next one's going to be called, Well, That Escalated Quickly.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I just look at everything that's changed and think, gosh, that's fast. You know, so hopefully, it takes good, thoughtful people like you, to ask questions that are hard to answer. And that's what we just have to keep on doing, is just asking hard questions and being reflective and being smart. And so thank you for letting me be a very small part of what it is that you're doing, because it's truly important.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. Again, folks, the book is Super Mad at Everything All the Time, Political Media and Our National Anger, written by Dr. Alison Dagnes, who is the chair of the Political Science Department at Shippensburg University. Alison, thank you so much for being here. It was delightful, and I look forward to the next book.
Oh, thank you very, very much. Thanks.